The Departments of Defense and Energy used blacklisted Chinese government supercomputers to help carry out more than 100 nuclear research projects. Oh joy. That's according to reporting from the Daily Caller News Foundation. The projects were primarily conducted through American labs. These projects reportedly have a civil and a military application. One example, space weather modeling, which can satellite communications, which involves satellite communications.
So this would appear to be a national security threat, as China may stand to benefit from the research conducted in partnership with the US. Joining us now to share what he found in his investigative report is Philip Lenczycki, an investigative journalist for the Daily Caller News Foundation. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So just sketch out exactly what is going on here, because I read your piece and it seems to me that oftentimes these are joint research projects, I think, between the US and China, and the Chinese side is using these supercomputers, and there are security concerns from the American side about that. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we discovered was that there are at least 102 instances in the last few years in which either the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy had funded research projects that the majority of these, as you mentioned, involved U.S. national labs as the main, research entity on the U.S. side, and on the Chinese side, they had researchers that were connected to sanctioned Chinese supercomputing centers. And so really the main issue that we found was that while the US entities are sanctioned from sending any type of US origined items to these sanctioned entities, the workaround would be that they could potentially send information or items to China-based researchers working with them on these projects, and that those China-based researchers could then actually physically press the buttons on these sanctioned Chinese supercomputers, and that they could run simulations and conduct calculations for these research projects. And the concern is that not only would the information, the core research potentially benefit China's military, but that by feeding these supercomputers with these complex, data sets, we could be, sharpening their algorithms and giving them an edge.
Who is doing, what agencies, what U.S. authorities make the determination that these are blacklisted, that these are sanctioned? Because that would seem to be an issue if one aspect of our government is saying don't work with this institution, and some other aspect of our government is saying no, it's fine, go ahead. That seems not good. Who does the blacklisting and the sanctioning?
Good question. And so the answer is the Department of Commerce. And I would think that in these cases, these supercomputing centers in China were sanctioned for their role allegedly in helping the Chinese military with some type of nuclear weapons research. So it had something to do with nuclear weapons and their weapons of mass destruction programs. You would think that the Department of Commerce was not the original entity to make that determination and, scoop up that intelligence, that it had something to do with the Department of Defense, or another agency like, from the intelligence community figuring this out. But it was ultimately Department of Commerce that sanctioned them.
In relation to these projects overall, I assume that one of the justifications for them is that there are some areas where China and the United States does still cooperate, even though there's an underlying, certainly competitive relationship, or some would say adversarial relationship. Is there a way of taking advantage research-wise of these kind of joint projects without running into these security concerns? Or are those security concerns inherent to a nation like China, where the Chinese Communist Party exerts such control?
That's a great question. I think that the lawmakers and intelligence analysts with whom we spoke, their position is that any type of cooperation at this level, especially with already sanctioned entities, would be harmful potentially to U.S. National security interests. Now, the reason why these national labs and the Department of Defense might have chosen to conduct research projects in partnership with individuals associated with these sanctioned entities is quite interesting. And we have our own supercomputers here in the United States. And according to the global forum that ranks the ability of supercomputers called the Top 500, in fact, the United States has the fastest, most powerful supercomputer called El Capitan, and it's in one of our national labs in California. But what's interesting is that it might be the case that it is not, in fact, the most powerful, and that China might have the most powerful supercomputer. The reason being is that back in 2019 or so, China stopped participating in this global ranking forum after the United States began to sanction their top supercomputers after allegedly discovering that they were working to help with China's weapons of mass destruction programs. So we don't know the capabilities of China's supercomputers, and this might be one reason why these US entities feel the need to tap them for their processing power.
Do we have any evidence that this technology that we are working on in partnership with China has already been put to some kind of ill effect by them? I'm thinking of all the news stories over the last couple of years of of satellites, of spying, of balloons, of objects in the sky. Some of that which I think was shown to be our own military technology that was not being disclosed. But are they are they up in the sky based on this technology?
Not to my knowledge, but we could imagine that some of this would be already used to their benefit. For instance, one of the projects was specifically focused on improving, memory storage for supercomputers, and so that would be likely something that these supercomputers in China would benefit from. Others, I can't imagine that the Chinese military wouldn't have taken a second look at them to see how they could be used. They had direct applicability towards things like you started off by saying with space weather modeling, which could help with aerospace or satellites or ballistics. So we don't know for sure, but folks are saying it's too close for comfort.
And a last thing, is this being looked at by anyone in Congress for a kind of review? Have Republicans taken this up? Although, concern about China's capabilities is one area of potential bipartisanship, I think.
I'm happy to say that I agree, and there are great members such as Illinois' Raja Krishnamurthy, who's on the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and that body, led by Representative John Molinar from Michigan, he commented on our piece and expressed deep concern for these type of research projects using sanctioned CCP supercomputers. So that much we know, and I'm hearing that there might be some movement this week. Hopefully that turns out to be the case, that some folks took interest and hope to, try and figure out what actually has occurred.
Philip Lenczycki, fascinating. Thank you for staying on top of that story. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Next up, from GWAT to DWAT, we'll explain what that means. I'll explain it to myself because I don't know either. Stay tuned.